Welcome to a special virtual edition of the Skeptics track at Dragoncon, where we put the science in science fiction.
Hello, welcome to the live Skeptic track with Dragoncon, streaming from Calico Cove Studios. I'm your assistant track director, Dr. Angie. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Today we have with us Benjamin Radford, who is going to give us a lot more information than we ever knew that we even needed to know about the phantom clown scares. Ben, are you on the line?
I am indeed.
There you are. There you are. So, well, my goodness, tell us about phantom clowns.
Well, yeah, it's so the phantom clowns are they're a version of scary clowns, and what makes them phantom clowns, because people are like, so Ben, you're talking about phantom clowns, like I mean, phantoms and clowns, how do these blend, you know, in a stew of weirdness? And the answer is that the phantom clowns specifically are ones that may or may not actually exist. And so they're sort of a subgenre of the evil or scary clown.
Okay, all right. So are these rampant? Are they taking over neighborhoods? Are they scaring people, perhaps?
They were, right? So this is where in case you're wondering where the weird part comes in, this is the weird part. So yes, so there's actually been, and I'll talk about it more, you know, more in depth, but basically there's a long history of these phantom clown panics going on over the years. And there we go, phantom clown panics. I'll begin with a short history of the clown, because in order to really understand phantom clowns, you have to get some sense of where they're coming from. So, the clowns, and I talk about this in my book, Bad Clowns. So, go for the next slide. So speaking of scary ass clowns.
Oh my.
So yeah, so basically, even though most of the clowns that Americans and Westerners think of are happy clowns, for most of history, clowns have always had this ambiguous nature about them. So if you look at the history of clowns, they weren't always happy, good, smiley clowns. And here's an example right here. You see Mr. Punch is a famous example. This is a certain red-capped, hook-nosed, gleeful, wife-abusing serial killer there on the left. It's a puppet, of course, with the famous Punch and Judy shows, which were first performed in Covent Gardens in London in 1662. And so again, this is family wholesome entertainment. This is what generations of British kids grew up as, seeing these two puppets beat the hell out of each other and throw babies out, just windows, just horrific stuff, but damn amusing. And earlier clowns, for example, there's a Harlequin, which emerged in the 1600s. In Italy, for example, you had this character that had the sort of patchwork suit and had these strange patterns on their faces and things like that. So there's many different types of clowns. Go for the next slide there. There we go. So there's, of course, many scary clowns in fiction. Here on the left is one of my favorite pieces of scary clown finalia, if you will. This is a 1962 cover of a magazine, Official Detective Stories, and it has what appears to be a woman pretending to write in a journal or something, not quite sure, and there's a scary ass clown stalking behind her. And one of my favorite parts of this cover is because it's a collection of various true crime stories. Right above there it says, California's Case of Eileen Ryan. Look for somebody who sniffs glue. It just, because why wouldn't you, right? Anyway,
right, always.
So you have this scary clown here in this 1962 cover, and of course one of the most famous evil or scary clowns is the Joker from the DC Comics movies and comic books, portrayed by many people, including Cesar Romero, and perhaps most memorably there by Heath Ledger. So next slide. So again, sort of setting the stage for why clowns are scary and why there would be this sort of social panic or concern about clowns. Now, as I mentioned, most evil clowns are fictional. There are, however, a few real clowns, real scary clowns historically, and probably the best known is John Wayne Gacy, the serial killer that stalked Chicago for many years and ended up killing, I think, nearly 24 people. He dressed as Pogo the Clown, famously. That's his self-portrait there on the left once he was imprisoned. And there on the right is a newspaper saying, "Killer Clown is dead." So there are people celebrating his demise. So again, the connection between evil clowns and Gacy was a bit overplayed because he didn't kill anybody in costume. The clowning wasn't really particularly relevant to his crimes, but the fact that he had even briefly, in some cases, dressed as a clown, cemented the killer clown persona, of course. So the next slide. So probably one of the more famous recent cases of people who were maybe inspired by the Joker is this couple right here, Jared and Amanda Miller, who actually were involved. If you remember the Clive and Bundy standoff, there was a connection there, and these two people ended up shooting up a mall in Las Vegas. So even though probably one of the most famous cases in recent times of somebody that was alleged to have committed a crime as the Joker, didn't actually happen. This is the case of James Holmes, the guy that shot up the Aurora Theater in I think 2012 or so, and the media ran with the story saying, because he actually shot up the premiere of a Batman film, and so as I talk about in my book Bad Clowns, this sort of got everybody talking about how he was inspired by the Joker, but in fact, if you dig into the case, he wasn't. So, but there are a couple of cases here of real life people that were inspired in some tangential way to the Joker. Next slide. Speaking of weird ass clowns, here's a not at all creepy early Ronald McDonald. This is Willard Scott, the weatherman. In his younger days, back when he was handsome and thin and covered with grease paint.
Ben, I just have to clarify. Did you mean weird ass clowns or weird ass clowns?
You know what? Whatever works for you guys. I'm not going to tell you what to do. This is Dragoncon, guys.
I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
No, not at all. So, my point here is that many clowns are unintentionally frightening, such as this scary ass early Ronald McDonald. So, next slide. So as I mentioned, most evil clowns are fictional, and as such, we recognize that they're not real. They're in fiction. They're in movies. They're in Pennywise in Stephen King's It. They're in Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and so on. And so when people think about evil or scary clowns, most of them are fictional, and there's a handful of ones like Gacy that are real. But the topic of tonight's talk is about the phantom clowns. And as I mentioned, clowns are inherently ambiguous characters. They're not good nor bad. They're sort of a mix of either or both, depending on the circumstance. And that's one of the things that makes clowns really intriguing characters. And sort of they have this two-faced, Janus-faced thing, right? Where one minute they're entertaining you, the next minute they're stabbing you, right? So there's this sort of twilight between real and fake, and scary and not scary and cute. And this is where we come to, next slide, the phantom clowns. This particular piece of art was I commissioned for my book Bad Clowns, and in the background you see I love this piece. In the background you see a white van with a couple other clown silhouettes in the back, and so it's interesting because if you look at these stories from a folkloric perspective, there are lots of stories of black sedans, white vans, black vans. So there's this whole subgenre of scary stories told about what's happening in vans. And that sort of blends with the evil clown character, as we can see in this illustration here. So, go on. So let me get back to when the phantom clowns first emerged. because weren't always with us. Scary clowns or ambiguous clowns have always been with us. As I mentioned, they're sort of inherent in the clown character. But phantom clowns specifically, that is, clowns that are said to be threatening or maybe dangerous, but whose existence isn't quite clear, is a fairly recent phenomenon, and actually dates back to the early 1980s. And one of the first cases that's known happened on May 6, 1981, when there were the police in Brookline, Massachusetts, were called, and there was an APB saying that that there was a vehicle circulating around, older model van with a broken headlight, no hubcaps and ladders, and it was full of clowns. Dozens, hundreds, I don't know.
You could fit 1,000 in there.
Right, yeah. Wouldn't that be, there's an AP, how many clowns are in there? 30 clowns. Okay, we'll get right on that, right?
Sorry.
Yes. No. This is a weird topic. I own it. We're just going to go with it. So the APB for a van full of clowns. You can imagine the cops like, oh, great. George is on the desk tonight, asshole. So, all right. So all right, fine. We'll look around for the clowns. But what was happening was that the children were actually reporting this as happening. So there were actually stories of clowns in vans allegedly driving around schools and parking lots and parks, trying to lure children to their van with candy, because that's the classic thing, right? Stranger danger. This is what you do. So, all right, next slide there. So, it was only one in a series of mysterious threats by phantom clowns. And there on the right is a wanted poster, not a real one. This was actually made by my friend and colleague Celestia Ward, who will be doing a talk on Sunday, I think. She's also my co-host on Squaring the Strange podcast. And she came up with this awesome wanted poster for a clown, maybe armed with pies and or squirting flowers. Last seen in a pink 82 Datsun with 23 accomplices, about par for the course. But the point here is that there wasn't just one or two cases. There were dozens of cases at different times, but they were almost all reported by children. So it'd be someone saying, "Oh yeah, I was walking to school and this weird thing happened, this and that." But the problem is that there was no evidence for that. Not a problem in that I wish they were real, but a problem for police and investigators and parents because they didn't seem to exist. The police were called, look for X, Y, or Z, look for these clowns, look for these vans. They weren't there. Nobody had reported seeing them, mostly only the children. Next slide. So it actually got so bad that the Boston public school officials issued a statement. This is by a guy named Daniel O'Connell. Quote, "It has been brought to the attention of the police department and the district office that adults dressed as clowns have been bothering children to and from school. Please advise all students they must stay away from strangers, especially those dressed as clowns." So, this does a couple things. First of all, it legitimizes the threat to many parents, right? Because you have an official statement warning parents and teachers and kids about this. And so it has this interesting snowball reinforcing effect where rumors that might otherwise not be taken seriously, because we're talking bands of clowns, right? So like, well, that can't be true. Well, hold on. Oh, so there's an official statement by the school district. Maybe there's something to it. And you see the same pattern occur in later phantom clown stories I'll be talking about later, for example, in 2016, where the news media would report these stories, and there would be this snowballing effect where by reporting them and by asking officials to comment on them, this legitimized, unfortunately in many cases, the fear and panic, because people say, well, I guess this must be true. So, next slide. The New England reports soon subsided, but the clowns reappeared in Missouri. So there's a whole string of these. Again, the first one occurred in mid 1981. And again, you had not all at once. It'd be a couple weeks here, a couple weeks there. There was a sixth grader in Kansas City who reported to the Kansas City Star about a evil clown that he saw. And here's I can't do it in a sixth grader's voice, but here's what he said. He says, he, that is the evil clown, was by the fence and ran down through the big yard when some of the kids ran over there. He ran towards the yellow van. In this case, it was, yellow. He was dressed in a black shirt with a devil on the front, because of course he was. He had 2 candy canes down each of his pants. That's just weird. The plants are black too. I don't remember much about his face. So,
why would you? When
right? Why? Right? There's a lot going on here. It's like, is this a fashion statement? Is this a TikToker trying to do what's going on here? Next one. All right. So here's a depiction that appears in Lauren Coleman's book Mysterious America of what the sixth grader said that he saw. And again, we see the other clowns waiting with the engine revved for the devil candy cane clown to come back empty-handed and swap seltzer bottles. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, that was what was claimed. Next slide. So this is one of my favorites. So one boy told police that he had been confronted by a clown armed with an Uzi machine gun in one hand and a machete in the other. Now this could be alarming, right? Uzi and a machete. He fired off 5 shots, but the brave boy counterattacked the clown by throwing his book bag at it. Now, it's not clear if this book bag contained munitions or what exactly is going on here. Maybe some toxic symbols on, I don't know. But so apparently this terrified the clown so much, he dropped the Uzi and the machete and ran off. I don't think I'm spoiling anything by saying that he later confessed that he'd made this up. Anyway, next slide. So what were some of the explanations for these? Well, let's begin with the least likely. That is rogue, cannibal, serial-killing, pedophilic, child-abducting clowns. Is it possible? Sure, anything is possible.
Why not?
Is it likely? No. So, this is one explanation. Another one was imaginative children. Likely. Hoaxes and hysteria. Another explanation was fictional characters somehow brought to life.
That
and
seems
this
like most likely to me.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad someone else had the courage to point out the likely ones here. So this is actually an interesting idea that goes back to like Fortean phenomena and paranormal phenomena. People, in some cases, people believe that simply believing in something makes it materialize. And there's a whole tradition about this. I don't have time to go into it, but there are some people that claim that these entities called tulpas, that are sometimes described in Tibetan theology, they materialize when people believe in them. And the more modern incarnation might be Slender Man, where people might believe that if enough people believe that Slender Man is real. This is the fictional online character that emerged about 10 years ago. That if people believe that it's real, that somehow it will manifest itself into some like Star Trek type thing.
Well, that's how Tinkerbell was reanimated.
This is true. This is I had forgotten about that.
Hands to believe in fairies.
Thank you. There you go. So all right. So then the other explanation, which again is really good one, is paranormal or interdimensional entities. So in researching my book Bad Clowns, I came across a handful of I don't want to say they were crazy, but they were crazy people who would come up with these theories like, well, isn't it possible that if enough people believed in this and they saw clowns, and if a certain number of children saw the clowns, that made them real? I'm like, no, that's not possible. Next idea. So anyway, go on. Next slide. So again, getting back to the evidence, this is the Skeptics track. So we're looking at the evidence. Bigfoot. Right? So the evidence is that despite numerous eyewitnesses, and by eyewitnesses I mean grade school kids primarily, telling parents and teachers, in some cases the others, that they'd seen these clowns. The police had nothing to go on. There was nothing. There was no surveillance footage. For the most part, no adults saw them. This was restricted almost entirely to kids. So not even a size 60 shoe print emerged. So next slide. And so even though the clowns were by far the most popular reported threat, it's important to recognize they weren't the only ones. I'm focusing on the clown characters because they were, in this context, they were the phantom clowns. But kids also claim to have been accosted by adults dressed as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Probably Raphael. I'm not sure. It could have been Donatello. I don't know enough about that mythology to know which one's more likely to abduct children. I'm guessing Raphael. Anyway, some people thought it was Bart Simpson. So gypsies, turtles, whatever else. And so the point here is that even though clowns were among the most popular, they weren't the only fictional costumed characters that were alleged to be circulating around trying to abduct kids. And there were a small number of accounts where the candy that the clowns were allegedly handing out to lure kids, as you recall, I mentioned that there were stories of vans of clowns who were handing out candy. In a few cases, there were supposedly the candy was drugged or harmful in some way. And of course, this goes back to classic Halloween scare lore, right? This is the classic tainted Halloween candy. This is the razors and the apples story. This is the cyanide in the Snickers bars, which actually happened. But this, again, it's all part of this larger context of scary lore and frightening rumors that circulate, particularly around Halloween and clowns. So next slide. So in some versions, the clowns are rumored to butcher the children in a Hansel and Gretel meet Sweeney Todd sort of way, and cannibalize their tender meat for sandwiches. So again, this is where we have the cannibal clowns. Some people say that the blood was sold with ice cream as raspberry sauce to get rid of the evidence. Now, I've had raspberry sauce. I would have a hard time mistaking that for child blood, I'm guessing. It depends on how much sweetener you put in it, I suppose. I don't really, depends on the recipe. Depends on the recipe. I'll leave it at that. In this particular slide here, Angie, do you have any idea who that is? I'll give you a hint. This is from
it's Howard. It's Ron Howard's brother.
Is it the famous one or the not famous one?
The not famous one. His brother.
Yes, this is Ron Howard's brother.
Yeah.
Clint Howard.
Clint Howard. Yes.
Yes, an actor of some note, particularly in grade Z horror films in the 80s, as I recall. He was in
Apollo 13, too.
He was. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Anyway, so I saw this movie when I was like 15 or 16, and it was about this ice cream man who goes around killing kids, because why wouldn't you? And anyway, so that's where that came from. Next slide. So let me sort of give the broader context here. So while newspapers were the primary source for the information about the clowns, as I mentioned, we're talking newspaper stories. This is in the era that we're talking about. Again, this is the mid to late 80s. There was no internet. Some people watching me be like, when was there no internet? Yes, there was yes, my child, there was a time before the internet. And during that time, these sorts of rumors circulated by word of mouth on the school grounds, by telephones, newsletters, things like that. And as with a lot of these cases, they were circulated by people who, for the most part, really believed it. They weren't knowingly spreading false rumors. It wasn't a joke to them. This wasn't some hoax. For the most part, they genuinely believed or thought or suspected that there may be some truth to it. And so they thought they were doing good. And you see the same phenomena happen these days on social media, where people will share self-evidently bogus stories of just the craziest wild stuff. And you would think they would be somewhat savvy by this point, but no. People, they share stuff. This is how you get the Pizzagate.
This is
rumor.
Tide Pods, remember?
Right, exactly.
This is the era of Tide Pods.
Exactly. So next slide. So according to Jan Brunnenwand, who's considered one of the sort of the grandfathers of urban legend research, and a friend of mine, I will add, New Jersey police questioned 700 school children. Many were petrified by the rumors, but concluded that, quote, "We couldn't substantiate the existence of a clown. We have no sightings, no assaults, no homicides." So there's this continual pattern. This is what makes them phantom clowns, is you have these stories, these rumors that are circulated primarily among children, that then, of course, they're reported to parents and teachers and others, and then they get legitimized and further spread by local communities, activists, school districts, and so on.
They would close schools.
Yes, absolutely. But the key here is to keep in mind that during all this time, no kids were abducted, no kids were harmed. Nobody was arrested. There was nothing there. So you had parents who were getting upset at the local police saying, "Why aren't you doing something about these clowns?" And the cops were like, "What would you like us to do?" They don't seem to exist, but we'll send some more officers out. Next slide. So there were later sporadic reports in Scotland in the early 1990s. There were reports. There were some reports in 1995 in Honduras, primarily at Tegucigalpa and San Pedro Sula, of killer clowns that were cruising the streets of large cities in cars or ambulances, sometimes abducting children. And I first came across these particular stories when I was researching organ theft urban legends. And I think many years ago, I'm pretty sure I gave a talk for Dragoncon at the Skeptics track on organ theft legends. Mm-hmm. And that was when I first came across these stories of in some cases clowns, in some cases just ordinary people driving around cities allegedly looking for children to snatch their organs and kill them. So again, there was some in Scotland, some in Honduras, and basically the initial phantom clown panic basically sort of faded away, because these things, they tend to have a shelf life. They're sort of a media fad, if you will. And so the stories get a lot of traction, they get a lot of head of steam, people are talking about it, people are panicking about it. And then after a while, as nobody's arrested, as no children are actually hurt or abducted, it sort of fades away because nothing is actually happening. It becomes sort of this weird story that people talk about but don't anymore. So they sort of faded away, and then they reappeared in Chicago in 2006, and they of course reemerged, and I'll get back to that in a second. But getting back to the initial phantom clown panic. Next slide. So, as I mentioned, during the phantom clown panic, there was no hard evidence, no children abducted, and you have to wonder, well, why is that, right? I mean, surely if they were real, surely at some point, one of these clowns, no matter how inept they are, no matter how much seltzer water they've been drinking, no matter how much grease paint they have on them, surely one of them would be able to abduct a kid from a park with Pokemon cards, right? So you would think just logically that this would eventually happen, but they're all these near miss scenarios. It was always
like
a clown. Right, exactly.
Like Star Wars stormtroopers. They just can't.
I had not made that connection. Thank you, Angie. I can count on you. See, we need to tag team these talks more often. So yes, so there were no children saying I was abducted by a clown. There were lots of children saying I was almost abducted by a clown. But again, no arrests, no suspects, nothing to go on. Next slide. So the question comes up, of course, well, where did the clowns come from? And I'll go through a couple aspects real quick. One of them is scary clowns in media. So a lot of parents suspected, probably correctly, that a lot of the images that the children were reporting came from TV. They came from, I mean, there's only a clown is very recognizable, right? You know what a clown is, right? So you don't have to be that creative to come up with a clown. Well, there was paint, there was wild hair and big shoes, right? So it's not like wow, all these kids are saying the same thing. They're describing clowns. Who can't describe a clown? So it's certainly true that in most of the cases, or certainly in the cases where the children were getting their depictions of clowns, were, number one, are pretty basic because clown costumes are generic enough that it's not hard to do. But it's important to not go too far down that because, for example, the original cases from the early 1980s couldn't have been inspired by Pennywise because that didn't air until 1990. They couldn't have been inspired by Killer Clowns from Outer Space because that didn't come out until '88. So you have to be careful about saying, well, they're all inspired by the TV shows and films. In many cases, there are, but it's hard to draw direct connections. Next slide. So another factor that was going on here around the same time was the moral panic about satanic panic, the satanic abuse panic. And for those who don't know, the early 1980s and to some degree throughout the 80s and into the 90s, there was a national moral panic about Satanists. And this was fueled by journalists such as Geraldo Rivera, who aired these sensational, dramatic stories, these lurid stories of satanic abuse and this idea that there were Satanists behind every tree that were waiting to jump out, and they had these rituals and they're killing people, and it was just entirely fabricated. It was people who were, there was this moral panic aspect to it. There were children who were, in some cases, were combining clown stories with that. And the satanic panic, and I think there's actually a presentation coming up on that.
Seth Andrews is giving his satanic panic talk on Sunday at 1.
Perfect.
So,
Join in for that one.
Very good segue.
There you go. And as he'll talk about, I mean, the satanic panic had very real consequences. I mean, there were people that were imprisoned in some cases for years based upon these false rumors. And so one of the things I always try to convey when I'm writing about this and talk about this is, please, people, recognize that these rumors can have consequences. They can harm people's lives. If you repeat information that's not true, some people think it's cute or it's funny or it's a joke. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, until that information hurts somebody, or it may get them killed. It may make them lose their jobs. There's lots of these sorts of stories and misinformation that can have very real consequences. Anyway, next slide. So another example, another thing that happened was actually in Atlanta. And was, there was a child serial killer. There was a series of about 24 high-profile child murders in Atlanta between 79 and 81, again, which is around the time this first emerged. In the public's mind, I mean, think about this, right? So you have real-life cases. I mean, the fact is that, yes, there are child abductions. They're very rare. The vast majority of child abductions are committed by a non-custodial parent or someone the kid knows. So the whole stranger danger abduction, it does happen, but it's very, very rare. But of course, if a child goes missing, until they find the child or find who did it, you don't know. And so it's easy to play into the public's fears about, oh my God, there's these kids missing, and there's these clowns that are supposed to be abducting kids, whatever else. And so this feeds into it because the uncertainty and the ambiguity. Next slide. So I'll talk a little bit about the origin of these rumors, and there's been some really good folkloric research by Sandy Hobbs and David Cornwell, and you can see the reference there, supernatural entities. And in most of the cases that they examined, I think most of the ones they looked at were in the UK. And in most cases, it was children telling other children, scaring them, right? So you had this like, hey kids, watch out, Billy, because if you go by that park at night, there's a scary clown that's going to come out and jump at you. So you have children that in some cases are spreading the rumors to other children and their peers and classmates. And of course, in some cases, understandably, they then tell their parents, because why wouldn't you if you think there's a genuine threat? And then the parents contact the school district, and the school district contact the police, and the police contact the media. So there's this snowballing, ballooning effect where something that began as a sort of little joke to scare some fourth grader turns into the nightly news story a week later. So the next slide there. So now there's a interesting connection here in that the Phantom Clown legends spread, and there's lots of interconnections. So for example, I mentioned a little while ago about the connection between Phantom Clown panics and organ theft panics. And I've written about that as well, but there are other ones as well. So for example, there was a panic, and I won't get too far into it because it's a little off topic, but there was a panic in the 1990s in Britain of what were called bogus social workers. And these bogus social workers were alleged to knock on people's doors, usually young mothers with a couple kids at home, and they would ask to see the children. They say, yes, is little Timmy here? Here's my badge. I'd like to see little Timmy. And they would go into the home and interview or talk to the child. Sometimes for a few minutes, sometimes for an hour, whatever else. And then they would just leave. And then the parent would say, well, who was that? I don't know who. What was that about? And say they would call social services. And social services would say, we don't know what you're talking about. We didn't send anybody there. So suddenly the parents are terrified, right? Because they're like, oh my God, who did I let into my home? I didn't verify their badges. I didn't call, to confirm. And so again, this is how they were called bogus social workers. Is the idea was that there were these people going around trying to, for whatever nefarious purposes, have access to kids. So you can see where the clown motif would come in. Let me see the slide again. So, yes. So again, it's one of a variety of other panics there. There were similar reports in Belgium about phantom photographers. These were photographers that would go around allegedly taking photos of kids who they didn't know in public places. And then, of course, the question is, well, this is weird. Why are they doing that? Is it because they're going to come back and abduct them? What's going on? In Italy, there were reports of gypsy women that were allegedly wearing these wide, huge hoop skirts. And you can see where this is going. Right? They were supposed to snatch children off the street and hide them under their hoop skirts. And I'm just wondering how many kids, maybe they're clown kids, maybe you can fit like 30, 40 of them. I don't know. This gets weird. Anyway, next slide. So, as I mentioned, I will return. So, as I mentioned, the initial clown panic sort of went from the early 80s to about the mid 90s, and then it sort of faded away. In 2015, 2016, they came back with a vengeance. And this is actually shortly after my book, Bad Clowns, came out. And I had people saying, so Ben, been seeing on the news, there's these scary clowns going around. Where were you last night? So I promise you, I was not faking these clown sightings, panics everywhere to sell a couple books. Although if you want to buy one, feel free. It's available on Amazon. So it began in August 2016 in Greenville, South Carolina, where there were reports of clowns that were supposedly behind this apartment complex. There was a wooded area. And the story went that, again, it began with kids claiming that they were playing behind their house in the parking lot, and they saw clowns in the woods. And allegedly there was a house deep in the woods. This gets to like Hansel and Gretel stuff. You can see where the folklore parallels are fascinating. And allegedly there was a house full of clowns deep in the woods behind this place. So
was it made out of gingerbread?
There you go, gingerbread and God knows what else, right? So the story went that this creeped parents out, and in fact there were actually shots fired. Some guy, there's a report that I read, some guy fired a gun, shooting shots into the woods. Thankfully nobody was hurt, but again, there's these sorts of rumors can have consequences. All right, so let me see the next slide there. So it really began, as I mentioned, in Greenville, and then I was having researched evil clowns and serial clowns, written about it. I'm like living this in real time. I was fascinated by this, and like it was just surreal. It's like every day I wake up like, what weirdness is going? Oh, look, there was a scary clown, that allegedly almost abducted 2 kids in Boston. Then 2 weeks later, it was a strange time to be an evil clown expert, for what that's worth. So what you found was that rumors and sightings spread across the country. In fact, all around the world. So there was primarily in the South, then it went from here, went there, and it was a near exact repeat of what happened in the early 1980s with the original Phantom Clown Panic. In this case, you had reports, again, primarily in the U.S., but there were a couple in England. There was one in Denmark, as I recall. I think there was one in Hong Kong, Germany, and elsewhere. And in this case, one of the things that made it different from the earlier clown panic in the 80s was, of course, social media. So you didn't have social media in the 80s, and so now you had, in addition to the rumor circulating, you had people sharing photos and videos. So especially on YouTube. So you would see, it wouldn't just be like, I saw a scary clown lurking around my school. It was like, I saw a scary clown lurking in my school, and here's a photo. It adds this sort of legitimacy to these sorts of legends. And you can see a couple there on the screen there. Next slide. So this then led to...
I'm sorry, clown lockdown.
Clown lockdown. Thank you. I coined that.
I like it.
So, thank you. So this led to, much to my and other folklorists' bemusement, and I don't mean to make light of it, because it is scary and there were real people affected by this, but there were a series of schools that were locked down because of threats from clowns. And so there were, I think, as I recall, there were maybe a half dozen or a dozen or so. And in most of the cases, they were, again, it's rumors online. So it was, somebody saying that somebody would, usually a student, by the way, it later came out, not surprisingly perhaps, they would send a message to the school's Facebook page saying that using a clown avatar icon, saying, I'm going to come and shoot up the school. Now, when I went to high school, people would pull the fire alarms. I didn't do it. I'm not confessing anything, but certain other people, if they wanted to get out of a test, for example, would pull the fire alarm thing, and that's what you did. It's what you do. It's fine. Nobody. But now, of course, because of social media, and again, keep in mind the context. This is 2016. This is when there were actual, real, legitimate school shootings.
Yes.
Right. So this is all happening within the cultural and social context of actual school shootings, which is just creeping people out even more. And so, as I mentioned before, you have this sort of self-legitimizing process by which these rumors get circulated, and then people latch onto them, and then suddenly they're real. Next slide.
So in the time of COVID, I bet scary clown seems like it's a walk in the park.
Yes, I miss the quaint days of scary clowns threatening to shoot up schools. Those were the days.
Yeah.
Yes. Anyway. So I'll skip this story. It's just a guy who made up a story about a clown. All right, next slide. So the 2016 clown sightings, it's important to recognize that there's not one single explanation for all of them. It's a variety of things. So many of them were pranks. Teens in clown masks or costumes scaring people in the Walmart parking lot, or driving by schools, laughing and cackling wearing clown masks. So there were cases where, again, these aren't real clowns. They're just people who went to Party City and had $10 and got a clown mask. But of course, in the news media, it's a scary clown, terrifying sighting. Then there were people then there were hoaxes. So I'm making a distinction here. So there were some people who were dressed as clowns and made a big deal about scaring people just for fun. And then there are people, much like many of the kids did earlier, who falsely claim to have seen or been attacked by clowns. And when I was researching this, I came across dozens of these. There was one woman I remember who she said that she was getting ready for work and she was getting into her car, and she said the clown attacked her, and she fought the clown off. What?
Nothing, just an image in my head. Go, please, go.
Yes. Fought the clown off, and then she called police, and the police investigated because they love those calls, and there was no evidence of it. Finally, it turns out that she worked at McDonald's, and when they asked her, "Why did you pretend to have been attacked by a clown?" which is a fair question, her answer was, "I was running late for work, and I needed an excuse." Yeah. So anyway, next slide. So we got the mistakes and the misidentifications. So again, the mistakes. So these would be cases where somebody thinks they see a clown but they don't, or it's they see something at the corner of their eye, sort of like Bigfoot sightings, So, or it could just be somebody who wasn't dressed as a clown, just sort of in that social cultural context, they see this. And then there were copycats that inspired by news and social media. And this sort of gets back to the pranks, where there was a lot of social media reinforcing, where, again, people would get this idea like, hey, the scary clown made the news. Like, hey, I could make the news. All I need is a clown mask and to drive by a Walmart parking lot, and suddenly my victim will be on the news talking about the scary clown that terrified her. So there's a lot of sort of reinforcing. Next slide. So, and I'm almost done here. I'll leave some time for Q&A, but I'll go through this real quick. So there's one particular clown that I should mention. That is Wrinkles the Clown. Now, Wrinkles first appeared in a 2015 YouTube video, allegedly of a home security camera, and that's in there on the screen, lurking underneath a kid's bed. So you can see why this went viral and people were freaking out about it. Next slide. After this went, again, we're seeing the role of social media and the perpetuation and initiation of these clown stories. So later stickers began appearing in public places in Florida that had his phone number. This is a really fascinating twist to this Wrinkles the Clown story. Oh, wow. So all of a sudden, you could call that number and speak to Wrinkles the Clown, who's scaring the hell out of kids. And it got even weirder because in some cases, parents would call them with their misbehaving kid online saying, Wrinkles, if my kid doesn't behave, I'm going to have you come down and scare the hell out of my kid or kidnap that kid.
Oh, some of you may be thinking, I can't believe that.
Yeah, right?
That's crazy.
Is this abuse? Probably.
Yes.
So, next slide. So Wrinkles the Clown, he's just a phone call away. So this is the thing. So next slide. So
Wrinkles needs Botox.
Wrinkles needs serious Botox. So I was actually interviewed. Wrinkles was the subject of a documentary that came out last year.
Wait, is that signed?
Yes.
Oh no.
So here's the thing. So I was interviewed for this documentary, and I'm in it. You can check it out. It's on Hulu. And so I asked the filmmaker, Mike Nichols, as a memento, can you autograph a DVD of the movie, and can you get Wrinkles to autograph it? And he did. So I have probably the only one autographed by Wrinkles, which is really cool. But then I realized because I'm
Michael
sure
Nichols took that and signed it.
No, because they know who Wrinkles is. I don't know who he is.
Oh.
This is part of the mystery, right? So I'm thinking this is really cool, but I'm thinking, well, Wrinkles surely saw a documentary about him. My name and face appears in that documentary. And they know my address.
He knows where you live, Ben.
Right. So
I
have mixed feelings about this.
You gotta have some clown repellent, man.
All right, next slide. So I'll end this by putting these phantom clowns into context. Again, social and cultural context. So as I mentioned, the phantom clowns are relatively recent, but they're part of a much longer tradition. And I talk about this in the last couple of chapters of my book, Bad Clowns. And these are what are more broadly known as phantom attackers. And these are mysterious figures, usually male and dressed up in some distinctive way, who are seen and reported as menacing people in public. I'll give you a couple of examples. Next slide. So, these phantom attackers, and again, this is a sort of folkloric, cultural, historical curiosity, but they're real thing. You can check them out. Probably the most famous one is Spring-Heeled Jack. And he was a famous dark-cloaked figure reported threatening and scaring people, mostly women, in London from the 1830s through the 1870s. And he was said to jump out, and he never actually killed anybody, never actually attacked anybody. He would just scare them, and then, of course, they would tell the story. Another famous case, which actually involves mass hysteria, which I've written about along with Bob Bartholomew and others, is the Mad Gasser of Mattoon. And this was a case, pretty famous case of mass hysteria, in which in 1944 there were reports of a man in a gas mask skulking around this town, spraying some weird scented thing, and some people said they felt weird. There was also the Phantom Slasher of Taipei, who allegedly jumped out at people in the 1950s and attacked them with a razor. Again, with nobody actually getting seriously injured. It was all just sort of these just so stories. And then finally, there was the Monkey Man panic in May 2011, or May 2001, that happened in New Delhi, India. And I researched that and wrote about it. And that was a case in which this Monkey Man figure, this diminutive, clawed, helmeted figure that was described as half monkey, jumped out at people and supposedly jumped like Spider-Man from rooftop to rooftop.
Wow.
Next slide. So, and here's a couple examples. There on the left is the Phantom Gasser of Mattoon, and there on the right is a broadsheet from looks like 1850s on Spring-Heeled Jack, said to jump out and scare people. So next slide. So again, in order to really understand the phenomena of phantom clowns, again, you have to understand not only the history of clowns and where they came from, but also the phenomena of phantom attackers, because it fits very neatly into that. So again, just to recap, in these phantom attacker cases I just mentioned, they all had sincere witnesses who reported their encounters to police. Some of them were hoaxes, some of them were joking, but a lot of them sincerely said, "I'm not joking, this really happened to me, oh my God, I saw this terrifying thing." They got reported in news media. The public reacted to it, sometimes sending out police officers to patrol areas. But in all these cases, there was never any hard evidence that they were ever real. And they just sort of faded away. Next slide. So for more on this, you can check out my book, Bad Clowns, which won a book award. I will humbly add. Next slide. If you wanted, I'll just end this by saying that the phantom clowns will return. This is a recurring theme here, right? We have not seen the last of these phantom clowns. There was a big emergence in the 1980s, 90s. There was a huge surge in 2015, 2016. And sooner or later, maybe next month, maybe next year, but sooner or later, the phantom clowns will be back.
Well,
so there you go.
My goodness. So one of the people in the chat has asked, is there an age bracket when children turn from enjoying clowns to making this kind of allegations? I personally don't know that children actually enjoy clowns, but
Well, that's a fair question. So, in my book, I looked at the phenomena of what's called colorophobia, which is the fear of clowns, and it would be a subset of anxiety disorders. So, for example, many people fear heights or snakes or things like that. The number of people that genuinely fear clowns is really, really small. It does happen, but it's more of a pop culture phenomenon. What you find is that usually the school age kids are the ones that, because this typically happens in schools where these rumors circulate. So typically, in most cases, these rumors of the phantom clowns attacking kids are elementary school, junior high school. In some cases, high school. As I mentioned in a lot of the clown lockdowns, the people that were arrested were often high school kids at their own school, right? So they were just doing it for fun. So that's the short answer.
Okay, so in this whole 2020 disaster bingo, is the killer clowns, is that the free space, or is that anticipated for next month?
Well, I like and hope to think that maybe there's enough going on between the murder hornets and the pandemic and Trump. I mean, there's enough real hurricanes. I mean, so I'm hoping that this is not the free space. So if there's any phantom clowns out there that are watching, just hold off. We got enough problems. Come back in 2-3 years.
Just come back in a couple of years.
Yeah, it's cool. Just save us all the hassle, man.
Oh my goodness. Well, Ben, thank you so much for joining us. I'll give one more chance to give us a shameless plug for your books. I'm sure that they're available on Amazon, and please add any others that you care to mention.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So again, I did write a book on titled Bad Clowns. All my other books had subtitles, but I couldn't think of a good subtitle because really, bad clowns, right? What are you going to add to that? You can also find me. I have a podcast called Squaring the Strange, along with Celestia Ward and Pascual Romero, and we come out every couple weeks. So if you're interested, I often cover some of these topics on there. And yeah, I'm around and about. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and just be careful about the rumors you spread on social media because they can sometimes do some damage.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ben, for joining us. And thank you for joining us on the live stream on the Skeptrack with Dragoncon. These videos are available on Skeptrack.com. Thank you, Mark Ditzler and Calico Cove Productions. This is we're in their studio. I'm Dr. Angie. We'll see you later.
As fun as all this streaming content is, we sincerely cannot wait to see you all in person again next year. Remember to stay healthy and safe until then. Wear a mask when interacting with other people out in the real world. Want more Skeptrack? Get more than 10 years of Skeptics track programming at our video archive. video.skeptrack.org